RugbyRenegade.com, the #1 online strength and conditioning program for rugby. Are you ready to get bigger, stronger, fitter, and faster and dominate your opposition? Welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast, where we build machines.
Hello and welcome back to episode 59 of the Rugby Renegade Podcast. My name is Jamie Bain and today I interview Zach Even-Esh, the underground strength coach. We talk about all sorts of things in terms of strength and conditioning, but we go into depth a little bit more into stuff that might help you right now if you're still currently in lockdown with the coronavirus pandemic. Some great advice in terms of bodyweight training, and then if you do have access to equipment, what you can do then. But just great information in terms of overall training. So give it a listen and let us know what you think. Zach, welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Let's start by you telling us a little bit about your background, how you got into strength and conditioning, and who you've worked with.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, Jamie. Been doing the strength and conditioning for about 18 years now. 2002 is when I kind of turned it into my profession, which started a bit on the side because I was a phys ed teacher working in the schools, and started training a couple local kids in my neighborhood out of my mom and dad's garage and backyard with some equipment that I purchased used from a gym that had moved, and then another little fitness studio that shut down. So the early 2000s was a unique time because it was new. You know, being a strength coach was kind of emerging as this new profession, and you didn't hear much about it. You really heard it more in the phrase of you're a personal trainer. And so I got into it kind of by accident because I was teaching and I had the summers off, and I wanted to take my bodybuilding background along with kind of this new philosophy that I was developing in my 20s, which was, you know, I was a wrestler in high school, and then I coached wrestling through college and after college. And so my bodybuilding background didn't help that wrestling. So I started like copying what you would see from Rocky IV, Rocky III. I remember seeing World's Strongest Man as I was a kid in the early 80s. So I started borrowing those things and started training athletes with a bit of old school bodybuilding work, a bit of training with stones and tree logs and throwing car tires and pushing my truck. And, you know, I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, but the athletes I was training, they were getting stronger. They were getting tough. They were getting fast. Their confidence was through the roof, and they were getting built, man. They looked like brick shit houses. And I was like, damn, this is firing me up. So I really went all in, obsessed over all that. And I tore my ACL around 8 and shoot fighting. And so that really pissed me off. And I started researching how the best wrestlers in the world were training. And the best wrestlers in the world at the time, and still really leading the way, but not as much so, was the Russian wrestlers. So everything I researched on Russian wrestling training, it kept bringing me back to the conjugate system, articles on Elite FTS, Westside Barbell, and I'm such a passionate, obsessive person that I kind of dove in so deep. I saw a phone number for Westside Barbell. I called Louis every week. Louis was selling VHS tapes. I bought every training tape and then training DVD. He had the free articles on his website. I printed them all out, put them in a 3-ring binder, studied them, applied them, experimented with the methods. And it just kept kind of blowing up from there. And in 2007, opened up my first warehouse and the underground strength gym. And before that was, 2002 until 2007 was garage, backyard, and local playgrounds. And you could go back and see some of our earliest YouTube videos of our guys training in a garage, training in the backyard, carrying tree logs, climbing rope, flipping tires, pushing trucks, jumping on and off picnic tables. We were doing that shit before the coronavirus made it like, now everybody's like, oh, train with cinder blocks. I was doing it because I knew it would get us tough and strong. And that's what our athletes that I was training needed. And so since then, the training has really evolved. Back then was a lot of guesswork, was a lot of trying to figure it out, training athletes really for my first time. Now, I can't even tell you thousands upon thousands of kids I've trained from youth through college, through military. And so now it's, a proven formula.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is one of my questions coming up, training in the current environment. So we will touch back on that. But really interesting. I wonder how many other people are kind of inspired by that Rocky IV training montage to go into being an S&C coach and trade in general. Definitely, I agree with you there. Now, you've had some great results with youth athletes. So what's your approach to training with these athletes? You spoke a lot about Westside Barbell. That's a lot of what they do is based on powerlifting. How have you kind of transferred that to your young athletes trying to improve sports performance?
The first thing that I looked at was I'm looking at, I had first spoken to Louis so many times. And so I was reading his books, yet what he would say to me was there was a lot of flex space. There was a lot of room to experiment. So the main thing was you got to train them to get strong as hell. You need the absolute strength method. But if you're going to train combative athletes, rugby players, wrestlers, football players, then you don't want to just focus on the 1 rep max, right? Which people think is the only way for absolute strength. He really got into my mind the idea of special strength training, which was training strength endurance, speed endurance, power endurance. So doing a lot of supersets, doing a lot of repetitive efforts in the 3 to 6 rep range with sub-max weights. And so I'll use the conjugate method for exercise selection and switching up the exercises we use, which helps avoid the overuse injuries. And also athletes like rugby players, football, wrestlers, they're so eccentric. They like all of the changes. And so I'll use the conjugate method with regards to exercise selection, but then I'll use the concurrent method for training on the daily basis, which means I don't like to really just do strength work focus for the day or dynamic work focus for the day. I found that as athletes, it gives them a better preparation for what their body and mind need to be prepared for in sports. So we incorporate speed and power work after the warm-up, or the warm-up segues into, the plyometric work. We incorporate strength and repetition method for building muscle and building muscular endurance. And then we always have some sort of a finisher with carries and sleds. And that was really inspired to me. Early days, Louis Simmons, early days, Dan John, early 2000s. Louis was telling me about training the UFC fighter Kevin Randleman. And Kevin Randleman passed away some years ago, but basically Kevin Randleman was a two-time national champ wrestler. Could have been a 3-timer, but he stopped wrestling. He didn't wrestle his senior year in college. Guy was an animal. And, he would gas out against jiu-jitsu guys. So Louis would boost his strength endurance. He'd have him do 10 minutes of a barbell clean and press complex. He would do like this 3-rep complex like every 30 to 45 seconds. Then he would talk about training these wrestlers, and they would throw medicine balls for 5 minutes straight. They would slam them down for 10 reps, throw it against the wall 10 reps, just keep going and going for 5 minutes. And so I started looking at that saying like, man, we need to up our conditioning versus the common just go out and run conditioning. And then he would tell me about guys, dragging sleds for a mile or carrying stuff for time, carrying water-filled kegs. And so anytime he shared an idea, I was on it. So I started getting kegs, and we filled them up with water. We filled them up with sand, sandbags I was making, all these heavy medicine balls that they now sell. We started utilizing them, and it was just powerful, man. Like, it was like, this is the shit that works. It never denied to deliver powerful results. And so it's kind of like been the system that we stick with. Get in a warm up, which is athletic based, with speed and power work and throwing objects and jumping and doing calisthenics with, a flexibility and mobility focus. Then moving into the strength and power work, yet organizing it with supersets, so you're getting your conditioning up. And then doing our finishers, all different kinds of carries. Dan John, I remember back in the days where he was working with Jim Jones, you'd see him doing a lot of these carries and sleds. And so I ordered my first sled from Louis. I remember I'd call him up, then he'd put his wife on the phone to do the ordering. And my first sled came in the mail with like no box. It had a book of stamps taped to it. So every time I tell people that story, they're like, holy hell, that is hilarious. He was answering the phone from his house. And so the sleds we would utilize at the where I lived, where I was training the athletes in my garage and backyard. At the end of the workout, I kind of break it up into 20-minute segments. It was like 20 minutes in the garage, 20 minutes in the backyard. Then we'd get in my truck and we'd drive like down the road. At the end of our development was an elementary school. And so in the evening or on the weekends when school was closed, they had this big open grass field and the playground. So I'd have athletes like push and pull the sleds across the grass. Then they'd sprint to the playground. They'd get under the picnic table and like military press it, then do box jumps on the table. Then they would do pull-ups off the monkey bars, sprint back, push my truck. Then there was a hill. I'd have guys sprint up the hill and then wrestle with each other at the top. So it was like I was really pulling that stuff from Rocky and then listening to Louis. And then to build the muscle, I just looked at the way the guys were training, more so from like the 50s and 60s, even a little bit before the golden era of bodybuilding. And a lot of those lifters, they were power lifters who were also bodybuilders. And they could also do a lot of gymnastics work, hand balancing, high volume calisthenics. So everything was an experiment. And then like Bruce Lee says, just, absorb what is useful and discard what is useless. And that's how the training evolved. And, today training is different because the kids are much different. I'm training so many different kids, whereas my early days of training people, Jamie, I just had tough people showing up. Like somebody would throw up and they would just get back to the workout. And as the years evolved, it's like if somebody's feeling a little nauseous, they're like, I'm not feeling good. I don't think I could. It's like the world is going to end. So my training has had evolve for the type of people.
Yeah, definitely. You've covered tons of stuff there, like loads of good ideas and kind of stuff that's kind of relevant for today in this current environment. And you mentioned you've had a lot of experience working with combat athletes, wrestlers, and football players, etc. Now, specifically when you're training that, I guess, explosive power to dominate contact, what's your approach there? You've already mentioned sleds and pushing trucks and stuff, but what's your go-to, I guess?
Well, you got to build a suit of armor on the body. You got to put muscle on people. And I think bodybuilding has been shunned, but the bottom line is, like, you've got to put muscle on people. And so if there's no muscle on the body, especially for younger athletes who are like teenagers and early 20s, just adding muscle builds strength, and adding that muscle, which then builds strength, builds speed. And if you're training in rugby, especially you're practicing, you're sprinting during practice. So you're getting a lot of your power work. So what I like to do is those moderate rep ranges. I love the 5x5. It's always been kind of like a proven system of getting people stronger, putting on that blend of size and strength. Some people call it functional size, functional bodybuilding. And so 5x5 is just great, but I'll also do 8x3, 12x2. You're getting about 25 reps, but I feel like you got to put muscle on. If you're afraid to put on muscle, and most field athletes are not, it tends to be kind of like the martial arts type athletes, the combat athletes. They want to stay light and skinny. And I always tell them, like, there's no benefit in being skinny and weak. It's just not going to help you. So if you're hungry, you got to eat, and your training should be focused on, of course, performance. But part of that performance is putting on the muscle. So is there a go-to exercise? It depends. It depends on the person. But, you can't go wrong with different kinds of farmer walks, different carries, whether it's carrying kettlebells, dumbbells, sandbags, water-filled kegs, full body exercises like power cleans or heavy shouldering, picking up heavy med balls and sandbags from the ground to the shoulder, or clean and press, any variation, whether it's a dumbbell, kettlebells, barbells. And then, of course, squatting, deadlifting, benching, overhead pressing, bent over rows. It's not one exercise that's kind of the make or break. It's, can you put them all together, and does the athlete follow through on what he needs to do outside of the gym? So we could have a great training program for the whole team, but if half the team screws off on their nutrition and lifestyle, only the half that follows through on the lifestyle is going to be the ones getting the powerful results. So, I've seen how two athletes can train side by side for like several years in a row, and one athlete thrives and the other one does not. And it's a lot of the outside factors: nutrition, sleep, mindset. These things that are the make or break factors are the things that tend to happen outside of the gym. Not that you could have a crappy program, but it's got to be 100% with everything versus, hey, nutrition 70%, training 30%. I say nope. Everything is 100%. That's it. It's put 100% to everything if you want to win. And that's, how I look at things. When I train people, I tell them, like, if you don't want to follow through, then you're not going to be able to work with me. I'm not doing it. I'm like getting like cranky and old because it's like, I just want to work with people who take the information and run with it. And so I sometimes look, Jamie, at these old powerlifting books from the guys that set world records in the 70s and 80s, Bill Sino, John Cook, Bill Kazmaier, and it's like, all right, they did what would be viewed as like a power bodybuilding routine, and nothing fancy, all barbell work, a little bit of machines, and some high rep calisthenics like push-ups, pull-ups, and dips. But they did a lot of things like 5 sets of 5. In fact, they even did higher reps than what a lot of powerlifters do today, and they did, the linear every week. They did, sets of 12 and 10 one week, sets of 8 the next, 6, 4, 2 leading up to the meet. And it's like, you look at how they lifted, and it's like they'd squat and they'd work up to like a heavy 5 or a heavy triple, then they'd be done. Then they would bench press and work up to like a heavy triple and then do 3 sets of 15, like burnouts. And so they just didn't complicate what it took to get strong. It was like squat, bench, deadlift, do curls, do push-ups, do sit-ups, run fast. And sometimes I think we get so specialized and so fancy that, that this is why a lot of athletes, we now talk about shit like, do they buy into what you're talking about? Do they believe in it? It's because they've been, bombarded with so much fancy stuff on the internet. Some kids don't even want to do the hard basics. They want all the fancy stuff. And I've trained athletes who were like, I can't squat, I can't deadlift. And then those athletes always lose when it really counts. I can't really imagine too many rugby players, if they avoid squatting and deadlifting and power cleans and benching, they're going to be at a disadvantage, not just physically, but also mentally, because you get confidence when you're able to squat heavy. You feel tough when you're doing power cleans. And so training is never just physical. It's always mind and body. And if you have a rugby player who's like, well, instead of squatting, I need to stand on this wobble board, close my eyes, and you throw the medicine ball to me, they must have seen something on Instagram or YouTube. Now that's what they believe in. And I've trained athletes like that who thought that that's what they needed to do instead of the squatting, the deadlifts, the jumping, the throwing of med balls. And it's like, look, man, the best people are doing these best exercises for a reason, because they provide results.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've covered a couple of my next questions there, but you've given tons of ideas of training approaches and two really good lessons for athletes there. That, you know, it's sticking to the basics, and it's not just that; it's the stuff away from the gym that counts. As great message there. Now, this is a question we ask all the guests on the podcast, and you might have already just touched it then as well. What is the biggest mistake rugby players make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
What's the biggest mistake? Who makes? The coaches or the players?
Players, yeah. And obviously, you can just put that down as athletes. It doesn't have to be rugby players.
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistake in training, training is kind of like an umbrella term. When I say training, I don't just talk about the things in the gym, talk about things out of the gym. And it's pretty much what I just said. So biggest mistakes are you get caught up in the fads and the gimmicks. You start doing exercises that look cool, but don't challenge you, and also don't really deliver results. They don't make you stronger, faster, or tougher. So, staying away from the basics is a mistake. The barbell basics, the heavy dumbbells, the kettlebells, you've got to squat, you got to do some sort of pressing motion. I think squats are really the key movements for the majority of athletes, rugby or not. And then the other big mistake is the poor lifestyle outside of training. So if you're not eating properly, you're going to cancel out any results you could have gotten from training. And sleep is huge. And I coach at a high school full time, and I scream at these kids like, if you're yawning, don't yawn. And then you find out, they don't go to bed till 12:30, 1 a.m. Then they wake up at 6:30. You can't be a beast going to bed after midnight, sleeping 5 hours. You need 8 hours minimum, preferably 9 hours. Then they need a good 30, 45-minute nap, maybe an hour nap during the day. So the training can be very good, but if the lifestyle is crap, then that will cancel out everything. And so, kind of like what I said before, it's 100% to everything, not just 70% of this, 30% of that. They must be committed to everything. A good story is my buddy Joe DeSena, who owns the Spartan Race. He had read a book, or a blog actually, and it was called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And I'm not sure which but basically they wanted to win the Olympic gold medal, and they said everything we do has to be, will it make the boat go faster? So, all right, guys, we just train hard. Let's go to the movies tonight. All right, will it make the boat go faster? No. Okay, we're not going to the movies. All right, guys, let's get ice cream. Well, will it make the boat go faster? No, don't do it. Well, that's the obsession you need if you're training to be great. And some guys genetically can get by without it. They could party and do all that stuff. But look, I've been at the college level, at the higher levels of college wrestling, and it always comes back to bite them in the ass when they're not doing all the right stuff, when they party too much, smoke a little pot. Oh, I just smoke pot on the weekends. It adds up. It starts catching up to them because the competition, there's plenty of, hyper dedicated guys out there training to destroy the people that are only going at 80% effort,
Yeah, definitely. It was a British rowing team actually, and I haven't read the book, but I saw a presentation by one of the rowers, and yeah, it's quite inspirational and a really good way of looking at things. Whenever you've got to make a decision, does it actually improve your performance or take you closer to where you want to be? So it's a great point there. Now,
yes,
as I'm sure everyone's aware, we're in the middle, hopefully in the middle, and things get better of lockdown. And people are stuck at home, struggling to not able to get to gym and struggling to train. So, if they can only rely on bodyweight training, they've got no equipment at home. What would be your suggestions to them?
I tell people, if you don't know how to do anything, you all know how to run and do push-ups. Everybody in the world knows how to run and do push-ups. And I tell this to my son. I go, you want to become a better athlete, go sprint outside and do push-ups. And I don't care if it's high rep push-ups, clapping push-ups, feet elevated, close, any push-ups are great, and sprinting is great. And so whether it's sprinting hills, whether it's doing just 100-meter sprints, 400 meters, so on and so forth, sprinting and push-ups are going to be the king. From there, then it's like, okay, what equipment do you have? Can you do pull-ups somewhere? Can you do squat jumps? You could squat jump anywhere. And we do all kinds of jumps, whether it's broad jumps, frog jumps, hops on 1 foot, and then after a certain amount of reps, go to 2 feet. All of these exercises are great, but I always come back to push-ups and sprints. They are tops. And of course, I love lunges. I love split squats, one-legged RDLs, but now you're starting to get fancy. I like to just attack the basics. Herschel Walker, calisthenics and sprints. That was his thing. Can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, definitely great advice. I still try and include push-ups, in a regular program. I think they're kind of underutilized. I think they're really good for shoulder health and basic strength, and tons of different variations to do them to keep athletes sort of enthused with the program. And then, so moving on from that, if you've got someone who's got access to a couple of kettlebells, a couple of dumbbells, what would you suggest to them?
Clean and press, carries, snatches, and if you have lighter ones, go out to an empty field and do throwing. So do like a clean, and instead of pressing it up, like throw it forward like you're throwing a shot put. Snatch throw, rotational throws. Did a podcast with a buddy of mine, Dean Miller, and he did a Olympic camp out in Canada for shot put, and it was I'm forgetting. Louis Simmons always references the coach who wrote the book on special strengths. Let's see, I have his book right here.
Verkhoshansky, is it?
I think so, yeah. Was it Verkhoshansky? Who was the hammer coach?
Oh, Bondarchuk?
Bondarchuk.
Yeah.
It was Bondarchuk at this like Olympic village in Canada. And my friend said Bondarchuk had him, instead of throwing the shot put, he often had him throwing the dumbbell, like up to a 60-pound dumbbell, like a shot put, to just give him the special strength needed. So they didn't have a 60-pound shot, so they had him throwing the heavier dumbbells with the same motions. And so throwing and sprinting and jumping and carrying is some of the best stuff you could do.
Yeah, that's some awesome advice there. Finally, again, a question we ask everyone is, what advice would you give to an upcoming strength coach?
Yeah, I like this question because the younger strength coaches of today, not all of them, but a lot of them are struggling in a lot of ways. Number one, their work ethic is just not impressing me. I tell a lot of them, I go, guys, I'm 44. I'm waiting for you to outwork me, to out-energize me, to out-coach me. And so I feel like my background in wrestling has certainly helped. But I say to my coaches on my team, they're younger, like, guys, if you had a child on the floor and you were a father looking in, would you be proud of the way you're coaching? Are you coaching more than just the technique? Are you motivating? Are you talking to them about life? Are you high energy? And as much as people say that, strength coaches shouldn't be like rah-rah cheerleaders, let me tell you something. I don't want to be around a coach who's not pumping me up, who's not bringing the thunder, bringing the energy. And so I'm on my coaches about that. Like, guys, I don't want to see you on your phone. You should be talking and coaching and exhausting yourself by the end of the night. You should be bringing the thunder. And so coaches need to have more energy, number one. Number two, they need to learn how to do research. So instead of messaging me on Instagram, hey, how do I do this? Hey, do you have any business tips? Yeah, I've got hundreds of articles and podcasts that you could search them right on my podcast. Like, show me that you're willing to research and do the work before you just say, hey, hand me the answer. And that to me is, where's the work ethic? And so those two things right there, I believe, can take a coach very far. So let's say I am, you've applied for a job at my gym or we're working at a university and I want you to coach a group. Well, what am I going to think about your coaching style? Do you command the room? Do you look good, right? Do you look like you work out? Do you have energy? Are you clean shaven? Does your hair look good? Do you have a smile on your face? Are you able to adjust your coaching? Did you learn that, this kid is working real well with your high energy, but this kid might need you to walk over to him and just kind of, quietly give him like a piece of, coaching feedback? Are you able to have multiple personalities within the same, coaching hour, coaching group? So a lot of this comes down to work ethic. Are you willing to work at your craft? Are you willing to research and learn and be open-minded? But hard work is going to be a big ticket for strength coaches because it's a damn tough job. You have to put in, it's a lot of hours. Not that I agree with that, but it is what it is. And you are the conductor of your orchestra. And so can you command that orchestra, or are you just kind of coasting, hoping everybody, hey, I could just put this workout on the board and they do it? No, you're the coach for a reason. Teach them, motivate them, talk to them about life, go beyond the sets and reps. And so, I know that's a lot of advice, but it comes down to being a worker. Are you a hard worker, legitimately a hard worker?
Yeah, great stuff. And then aside from that, in terms of research and things, are there any books that you'd recommend to young coaches?
Oh, yeah. So, Encyclopedia of Underground Strength. Okay, so that's my book. I'm looking at my desk. Purposeful Primitive is amazing by Marty Gallagher. Books by Louis Simmons are awesome. I love my buddy Josh Bryan's stuff from Jailhouse Strong, all of his books. And I think what's important also is reading a lot of the old books. I'm just going to walk around here to my desk. The old books have a lot of great stories that sometimes these coaches in their 20s, they don't understand the power of these basics. So I think I'm looking at my desk here. Super Squats is amazing. The Complete Keys to Progress, which are all these old articles from John McCallum. Let's see what else I got here. Trying to find some of the older books. I have the original Westside Barbell articles that were written from the Strength and Health magazines, actually Muscle Builder and Power magazines. So those are amazing. And there is somebody on Amazon who sells all those Westside Barbell books. The name of his book is, let's see, it's in my book. The name of that book is Forgotten Secrets of the Culver City Westside Barbell Club. So that's a pretty good book. I mentioned everything by Louis Simmons. Jim Wendler's books are great. And a lot of the early books from Pablo. So he had a lot of early books like Beyond Bodybuilding. Those books are great. And, looking for knowledge, I have a membership site where I post old articles. I post current videos from our gym. It's got thousands. It's 15 years that we've been posting information in there. Old videos from Dr. Ken Leisner, and that's the undergroundstrengthcoach.com website. So for, you got to read books, but you also got to dig in to the internet. the book The System by Johnny Parker, great book, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, the first edition, the early one, because there's a lot of great, there's training methods in there that you're going to need to utilize with regards to intensity, building muscle, the importance of atmosphere, kind of like training philosophy stuff that we don't really get into so much in a lot of these modern day books that are so like specific, sprint specific, and so on and so forth. Anything by Dan John is great. Brooks Kubik, Dinosaur Training is great. I'm just looking here on my bookshelf. I have so many great books. I love it. The old books, like I said, by Pavel, are great. And I buy a lot of old stuff. I go on eBay. I was going on eBay. I think I was buying some of these old books, Jamie. I don't even know if eBay existed at the time. So I would buy books from the early 1900s, like The Way to Live by George Hackenschmidt. The Mighty Atom is a great book on the strongman, the Mighty Atom. So I look at not just strength and conditioning books, but strongman books, kind of like methodology books versus, the very black and white type books of here's how we do things. So I gave you a long list of books. I also have videos that I've posted on my website, so they can just type in book and
Cool. Are you still there? Still there, Zach?
I'm still there. I'm still here, bro. So yeah, basically I said I've done videos of a lot of my favorite books, so if this list was kind of exhausting them, they could just go on my website and type in strength books, bodybuilding books, powerlifting books. They'll see videos I've done on my favorite books.
Oh, awesome. Well, we'll of course share links to that in the show notes. And yeah, I like looking back at some of those old books and realizing that they were training like that, 100 years ago, and it's kind of techniques that have been popularized today as the new big thing. It's like, well, no.
That's funny.
But yeah, some great suggestions there. And now I know we've run out of time because you've got to get and take the family to the gym, which is one of the perks of owning your own gym in this environment. But lastly, where can people learn more about you?
Go to zachstrength.com, Z-A-C-H strength.com, and Strong Life Podcast on Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. And again, we'll share links to that in the show notes. Just to wrap up, Zach, great to talk to you. Tons of great information in terms of training and kind of the background behind it. And obviously you're doing great things, and I've followed you for a long time, and I can attest to the energy you put in, like some of the videos I've seen. In terms of bringing that energy, you're one of the top coaches for that, and it's great to see. But thanks very much, and of course, stay safe in this strange times.
You too, my bro. Stay safe out there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zach. Great to have you on. Tons of great information there for athletes and coaches alike. Much appreciated, and all the best in the future. To the listeners out there, please continue to support us. Tough time for everyone, so it's great that we're getting positive feedback about some of the content we're putting out, and glad it's helping you. And to help, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe to the podcast. On SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, whatever you use for your podcasts. And of course, check us out at rugbyrenegade.com and on the social media outlets. Got tons of good content to come and more podcasts, so stay tuned.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. For more quality rugby strength and conditioning information, check us out at rugbyrenegade.com. Rugby Renegade, building machines.